Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and our program, Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Kathleen Antrim.
Thanks, Doug. It's great to be here. And we've got another great interview for you. We've got the critically acclaimed author, Reavis Wortham. It's Wortham. I want to do that spelling so you know how to look him up so you can buy his books. Reavis, welcome to the show. It's great to
Well,
have you.
thanks. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you guys. I see you at conventions, but we only see each other like once every 2 years, so this is fun.
I know. It's so excited to finally, Zoom is the whole new world, right? So to finally actually just kind of get to sit down and chat without a bunch of people around too. So get to maybe have a full conversation here.
Well, that's a rarity, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Exactly.
It sure is. So I want to start out with one of my favorite questions, and I want to ask you about your childhood.
Oh well, I had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. I split my time. Half of it was in the country at my grandparents' farm up in rural northeast Texas, Lamar County. My granddad was a farmer and a constable, so he would ride a tractor during the day and work cows, and then he would come in and clean up, as he would say, and put on his Sunday clothes. And y'all might remember that old phrase. And then he would go out and be the local lawman. We would.
Wow.
He'd go up to we had a country store up in there in that part of the world, and he'd go up there and sit at the store because that's where life happened. He'd get all the information. All the old farmers would come through.
Everybody gathered there.
They would. And that's where I got part of my education, is sitting at the feet of those old farmers at their knee when they would talk. Because after a while, they would forget you were there, and then you would learn some things that you probably weren't supposed to learn. But it was a great place for a kid. So that was where I spent my summers, vacations, Christmas. I was there every weekend because we lived in the city in Old East Dallas, and my dad worked at the Ford plant. And dad was a country boy. He only went there for the job. So when we had the opportunity, as soon as we could get finished from school and he get off work, we'd go to the country. And it was, I fished, hunted, ran the fields. We were talking a little earlier. I got stung by everything that could sting me, and bitten by everything that could bite me, except for a snake. So I had a great childhood and a wonderful time.
So my question, I want to follow up on this is how do you think your childhood might have contributed to you becoming a writer?
Oh, well, in two ways, in two or three ways, actually. Number one, I was an asthmatic kid, so I couldn't get out and do the things that other kids could do. I'd be out for maybe, for a couple hours, and then I'd come back in and have an asthma attack. So, and in
Oh, wow.
fact, that plagued me through high school and it kind of stunted my growth, I think, because when I graduated, I was 5'2". I didn't start growing until after I got out and quit having asthma attacks. So I don't know.
Wow.
Dr. Lyle may can
Did
weigh
you
in
did
on
you
that.
outgrow it? Is that what it was?
I did.
Childhood asthma does resolve itself sometimes.
Yep,
Yeah. Wow.
it
Yes.
Yeah.
did. Yeah, the last attack I had was I was 21 years old, and
Yep.
I haven't had one
That's pretty
since.
typical. Yep.
Yeah, and so I got past that. But since I couldn't do a lot of the things other kids could do, I couldn't play ball, couldn't run with the other kids. I was a reader, and I read everything I could get my hands on. Started with Cowboy Sam books, and of course, we had Tip and Jane, and Jack, and all those. But I was reading well beyond grade level by the time I was in the third grade. And I remember telling one of my aunts that I was going to be a writer someday, and that was in 1964. I remember that very clearly.
Yeah.
And so, and then, like every kid in the world, every would be author, I started writing, and I wrote on Indian chief pads and yellow pads and everything that we had around the house. And of course, the family's encouraging. They'd read this stuff, which was horrific, but they would say keep trying,
Yeah.
and I did that, and through elementary school. I mean, I wish I had kept 2 boxes full of rejection notices that I got over the years, because a lot of them came from when I was in elementary and junior high. I was trying to write for Reader's Digest. I would send
Oh my
these
gosh.
self-addressed stamped envelopes, and I did that for years. In fact, I even started sending them to Playboy magazine, because if y'all remember, Playboy paid $2,000 an article in 1968. And I thought,
And how old were you?
yes. Oh, I was in 8th grade. You know, I'm trying. I had a running correspondence with Playboy for years, back and forth, because I'd submit stuff, and
Oh,
that's
it
because
is a shame you didn't keep those letters.
I don't know why I didn't. You know, and I continued to do that till I got to high school, and then I got a real rejection notice from them, not just their mimeograph rejection notice. You know,
Yeah.
but and y'all remember mimeograph? Oh, we'd smell them. They would
Oh
come.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we were all high in school, and even the teachers, and nobody knew it, you know. But I got a rejection notice from Playboy, and it said, "Thank you. You know, we cannot use this at this time, but we appreciate your submission." But then there was a note at the bottom. Some editor somewhere had written, "You need to learn to type, kid." And so when when that came about, then I took typing, and you know, and I did that for years and years and years. I finally learned. I finally broke free when computers came out. That's when I could really type, because I was not good on a regular typewriter at all.
Yeah. I don't see
So,
how the old guys did that, because
yeah,
one mistake and
you
you
got to
start
start
all
over.
over, you white it out and it looks terrible. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't
Yeah.
see. That
I
was
don't
hard
either.
work.
And I
Stressful.
go back and go back and go back constantly, you know. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's something I never could have done. But you know, they learned how to do it, and they hammered through it, and we all learned on typewriters. I guess Kathleen, you did too.
I did.
Most of
Yeah.
us,
Yep.
yeah. You know,
Yep.
keyboarding wasn't a thing at the time, but that when I forgot my first computer at work, they put one on my desk and said, "Learn to use it." And first thing I thought was, "Man, I can write on this." So you know, I learned to write on computers, and that's when I got my started as a newspaper columnist in 1988. I sold my first newspaper column then. And
Oh
I've,
my gosh. So,
Yeah, you had a column in the Paris News way
yeah.
back. Was
So
that
you
like
would,
the first sale?
It was my very first sale. I was sitting in one of those boring meetings that we all have to. I was an educator for 35 years, and I was at a meeting before school started one year, and I just started writing a newspaper column because I was bored out of my skull. They were talking about things that had nothing to do with me, and then when I finished it, I took it back because I wrote it on a yellow legal pad. Took it back, typed it on the 286 computer on a big old floppy disk, you know, the
Yeah,
big
oh
yeah.
yeah.
and then I printed it on a tractor drive and put it in an envelope and mailed it to the Paris News and said, you know, I'd like for you to consider publishing this. Well, they called me back 4 or 5 days later, and they said, we like what you did here. It's unusual. No one's doing this as a newspaper columnist. Do you think you can do it again? And I didn't know what I had done the first time. And so I shook my head no, but I said yes. And they said, well, you're now our new columnist. And I've been a newspaper columnist since then. This is 36, 37 years later. And I'm still
Wow.
writing for the Paris News and a couple of other papers here in the state.
Oh wow, that's so cool. Well,
Yeah.
when did you decide to go ahead and start writing books and make a go at it as a living?
Well, when I was sitting in, my wife and I had just got married. We'd moved to Frisco, Texas, and we both had similar jobs. I was the director of communications for the Garland ISD. She was director of communications for the Frisco ISD. So we had one computer. We took turns on it in the evenings. And one night I sat down because I was on newspaper deadline. I had to get it finished. I had to get it written. And I always wait until the last minute before I write my newspaper columns, because if I write them early, they don't seem to be as good. And so I was sitting down there, but I couldn't think of anything to write. For the first time in my life, I couldn't think of anything to write. And I was looking around my office, and I saw a picture of my grandparents, my granddad that I mentioned to you, who was the constable and farmer, and my grandmother. And she'd never, I think the farthest she ever got away from her birthplace in Grant, Oklahoma, which is right out of Paris, was when she came to Dallas. And that was about it. Well, I take that back. I took her to Colorado once, but she never got away from that little farm up there in Lamar County. And so I looked over at them, and I remembered something she always said. Because she didn't have many sayings per se, but she would always look around. We'd be sitting in the evenings or out under the con trees or in the evenings talking. And on occasion, she'd say, I was born on this river and someday I'm going to die up here on this river, meaning the
Wow.
Red River of Texas.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's a great way to start something. So I wrote, "We're from up on the river." And then I wrote about my granddad, who was the constable, and at a time when he was investigating a series of animal mutilations in Lamar County.
Ooh.
And that went on for a while. I was 10 years old watching him do this. And he didn't know what a serial killer was at the time. I don't think anybody did back at that part in that time. But he was investigating something he didn't recognize. And so I watched him go up to the store and I watched him talk to people, and I rode around with him because that's what you did when you were a kid. You ran around with your granddaddy up there, and I'd listen to the old men. Doug, they were younger than you and I are today.
Exactly.
The old men. Yeah. And
It's
so
all perspective, isn't it?
it's all perspective. So I would listen to them talk about these animal mutilations, and they were ongoing. And then there was a body. I think they found a body up there in the woods, and they found a body hanging over a fence. And I didn't hear anything else about any of that as I grew up. And so I was an adult, had a job. My granddad was retired, and we were sitting on the front porch of his farmhouse one day, just talking. And I reminded him of those events. And I said, "Did you ever catch that guy?" And because, those mutilations were getting worse and worse, and there were a couple of bodies. And he looked at me, and then he looked out at the pasture, looked at his cows. He looked back over at me, and he had ice blue eyes. And he said, "Well, son, sometimes some folks just need killing." And that's all he said. And I never asked him anything else about it again because I was so shocked at his answer. And so I'm sitting there thinking, we're from up on the river at one night. And as I was saying, I was getting ready to meet my newspaper deadline. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So I wrote about watching him in the fields investigating a mutilated dog, taking a look at the evidence left over there. And I was with him at that time. And so that I wrote about 10 pages that night, double spaced. And I just hammered it out real quick. And then I got up and we ate. My wife came and sat back down at the computer later. And she, for the first time ever, I'd left it up and hadn't cleared it out. And she said, "What is this?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm just writing because I need to get this this deadline, this newspaper column done." And she said, "Well, this is the book that you keep talking about." And I said, "Well, no,
wow.
I don't think so." She goes, "Yeah, this is it. You need to finish writing this." And so I did. I worked on it for years, as beginning authors know. Most of the time, you don't get to just sit and work. You have to find time. And I wrote at lights. I wrote in meetings when I should have been listening. Anytime I could write. And I finished it up at probably around 2003, 2004. And then I hit save, but nobody had told me that one of those 5.5-inch floppy disks couldn't be overwritten so many times. And so I finished it up, typed those wonderful words, "the end," one night, and hit save, and the screen went blue, and the words "file corrupted" came up.
Oh,
And
no.
yeah, and I didn't know what that was. I took the disc to a friend of mine who was a techie, and he couldn't get anything off of it at all. One page is all he got out of it. And so I came home, bought a new computer, and sat down and wrote "We're from Up on the River" again, and rewrote the entire novel from memory. This time it was much faster.
Yeah.
And yeah, and
Oh,
it was published in 2011. That was my first novel, The Rock Hole, and that's when that one came out.
Now you
wow.
have several in that the Red River series. You have several books in that series now, correct?
I do.
Yeah.
That's my primary series. There's 9 books in that one at this time, and I'm getting ready to revisit it for book 10. They all take place in the 1960s. It's
Yeah.
historical fiction, historical mystery. But there's a lot of thriller aspects too. So I blend genres a lot. But I have other series. I have the Sunny Hawk series
Right.
that features a contemporary Texas Ranger. I have a new series featuring a couple of brothers who used to be undercover narcotics agents, but one of them is now a brand inspector, which is farm and ranch investigators is what they are. They're a branch of the Texas Rangers. They're affiliated with the Texas Rangers. And then
Is that Tucker Snow or is
that's
that?
Tucker Snow. Yes, sir, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that one
You mean
debuted.
like that?
That's
Yep.
it. That's hard country. Yeah, and it takes place. It's contemporary Lamar, up in Lamar and Red River counties, Northeast Texas, and that one debuted as an Amazon editor's pick for August of last year. So we've been really pleased with the results from that one. And the second one is coming out. The sequel to that one's coming out in August, and it's called The Broken Truth. So we're looking forward to getting that one out here pretty soon. So and this is something you guys as authors will appreciate and like. I'm waiting for a contract right now on a new series, still another series because I like to write, I guess. And it is, I've blended genres. It is going to be a Western horror series. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
traditional Western with a Walking Dead bent to it, I guess, or horror bent to it.
Mhm, mhm.
We're waiting for that one to get hammered out. Then that one's going to start coming. That will be out next year, and it's called
Oh, that's
Comanche.
exciting.
So that's going to be a fun one. I really like that. But I think I counted up. I've got 5 series now that I'm playing with. It's
Wow.
kind of
How many books total have you
it'll be
published?
published. I'm right around 18 now.
Yeah.
20 within the next couple of months. Tomorrow, my first traditional Western comes out. The Journey South. It releases as an ebook, and it will be available. And so that's a completely new series. If we continue on with that one, we've got a book contract on it.
And what's the
But
time period for it?
1870s.
18. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
was gonna
very
say,
cool.
Yeah, traditional Western. It's not quite your granddaddy's Western. It's a little bit different. It's got some humor to it. I'm really a smart ass, and I can't help it. So
We like that about you.
well, it's good, both good and bad, I think. But that's in there too. But it takes place it begins in the territories of Oklahoma back in the Indian Territory days, and then moves down into Texas. And it's just a good old fashioned Western because I always wanted to write something like that.
cool.
Wow. So what's your process? Are you a pantser? Do you outline?
It's like you're writing it, Kathleen, and it's coming up on my screen. I have no earthly idea what's happening. I sit down to start a novel, and I put my fingers on the keyboard and just watch it develop in front of my eyes. Even the first one, The Rock Hole, I didn't know who the killer was until the end of the novel, until I
Oh,
reached
wow.
the end
Yeah.
when the reveal came about, and I just threw up my hands. I can't believe this. And my wife came in. She goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "I know who the killer is." And she said, "Well, you idiot! It's your book. You should have known who the killer was from the outset." I said, "No, I thought it was somebody else." And so I just follow the story as it goes. So I don't have any preconceived ideas at all, other than maybe
Mhm.
a couple of characteristics from a character, and then or maybe one little tiny grain that I want to throw in there, and then the rest of it just develops itself. And I write all over the house. I'm like Mark Twain. Sometimes have you ever seen that picture of him sitting in bed with a typewriter on his
Yeah.
lap?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll do that sometimes. I'll sit here in my office. I'll be in the living room or outside. I mean, I don't have to be in any certain place. I can write no matter where I am.
Well, I'm curious when you write like, because I'm a pantser too. I don't. I have a scene, maybe 2 scenes. I just start writing. We'll
Yeah.
figure it out. We'll figure it out as we go along.
Yeah.
But do you edit as you go, or do you try to get the story written and then go back and edit?
No, I write one day and then I don't go back and edit it that day. But then the next day I come back and pick up the day's work before, I edit that part, and then that allows me to slide into
Right.
the next day's work. So I do, and then at some
Kind of a
point
warm up. Yeah.
it's a warm up and it's a cleanup, and then it refreshes my memory. But at some point, at least in each act, I will get to the end of that act one, 30,000 words. I'll go back and begin at the beginning and read it through for a cleanup
Right.
there, and then I'll continue on for the second act and the third act until
I think that's important. I do the same when I get to about 40,000 words, and it's about that point where you say this is garbage and you're a fraud and you don't know what you're doing, which happens in every book now. And but I'll do that too, and because I don't edit, I just fly through and write it. But when I get about there, then I'll go back and start at the beginning, because now I know where the story's going, and I want to get the rhythm and all the details right so that I push forward more, I guess, more efficiently,
Yes.
if you
Yeah.
will. Yeah. I like that method. I agree 100%.
It works for me every time. And then when I end a book early, I mean, technically 90, let's say 90,000 words is a novel. And that's where people say it, they, a general novel ends. When I hit that, I get to about 75,000 and I wrap it up then. And then I go back to the beginning one more time and I add in everything that I need. That's the spice in there, the things,
Right.
the little clues, I more description of the landscape and the world and the people. And I build on that. And by that time I'm to 90 or 95,000 words, but
Right.
I just float through them. I have no earthly ideas what's happening. And that drives a good friend of mine is Jeffrey Deaver, and he and John Gilstrap and we have a Zoom meeting every Wednesday, a happy hour. And it drives Jeffrey crazy the way I write. He just,
Yes.
because he is
Yes.
so
He's a huge outliner.
he is. And his outlines sometimes are 120 pages long. And in fact, we were discussing writing a novel together, the three of us. We were going to take turns each chapter, and that blew up in a hurry because Jeffrey just his head doesn't work like that. He just couldn't do it.
That's hilarious.
It's true. It's true. He
Yeah.
is an outliner, and
He
yep,
is.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
Well, his stories are pretty convoluted, so it's. I mean,
Yeah.
he's got a lot of moving parts, and I can see that. I started out as an outliner because I was afraid to trust myself to tell the story.
Uh-huh.
I think that was part of it.
Mhm.
But some people, when you write a complex story, an outline will work, but I find it stifling.
And I wrote one outline for one novel, my third novel, and I abandoned the outline by the second page. I mean,
Yeah.
it didn't go where I thought it was going to go
No,
because
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
that's not how
Yeah.
my head works.
And plus, you've already told the story.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you're bored with it. I already know this story.
There's that.
I don't want to spend the next 3-4 months hammering this thing out. I already know the story. Yeah.
That's it. And by the time I get to the second act, that 30,000 to 60,000 chunk,
Yep.
I hate that book so badly. I'm
Yes.
done with it. I don't want to write it anymore. But I
Yeah.
know when I get through that part to the downhill slide, and that's where the action's taking place, all the ends are coming together. And when I get to that point where I'm writing the climax, everybody and I listen to country music. Look at me, I'm country to the bone. But when I'm writing the climax, I crank up AC/DC and I'm listening to Thunderstruck full volume. My
I
wife,
love it.
she'll come in and say, "Turn it down. Are you working on the climax of the book?" "Yes, I am. And it's rocking and rolling."
That's hilarious.
It's
Oh
fun
my
to do.
gosh.
So you got a book coming out in August,
Yes.
and this new series. What else are you doing since you got so much spare time?
Well, yeah, spare time. I work harder now than I did when I had a full-time job because I had a secretary to do all, the staff to do some of the other stuff.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
But at this point, we have grandkids and we have the land up in Lamar County, so I write when I can, and I put some things off for a while, but then I get back into it again. But yeah, Broken Truth comes out in August. That's the second Tucker Snow book, and it's based on a couple of guys that I met just through the writing process. They were former undercover narcotics agents here for the DPS in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
And these guys now, we're retired. We're telling great stories. But I had met one of them who was a constable, Rick Easterwood. He was a constable in Lamar County, and we got to know each other. And then he got to tell me about his background and the things that he did with his brother. And he and Dan worked together, which is unheard of in the undercover world, in the meth world. They had to get special dispensation from the governor of Texas, Mark White, at the time, to work together. And they tell me these stories and the things that they did, and they're just outrageous. You can't, and sometimes they're funny, and other times they're scary. But then I take those stories that I hear from them sitting around a campfire, drinking brown water and just having a great time. And then I wrap them into my new character, Tucker Snow, who works for the Texas Southwest Cattle Raisers Association as an investigator. And he has his own set of problems in the past too that he's dealing with. His wife passed away, was killed by a guy on meth who ran his car into her car and killed her and a baby. So now we have Tucker trying to raise a teenage girl. And Doug, I don't know if you had girl children or not, but
No.
that's a whole other world that guys do not fan. So, Tucker's having to learn how to raise his daughter at the same time, dealing with some issues that he has there in Northeast Texas. But here's the whole idea for the first book of the series, Hard Country, came from a cattle ranch, a family cattle ranch that we had up in Oklahoma, not far out of Durant. And we say Durant, Oklahoma. It's not Durant, but we had a family cattle ranch up there, and we didn't realize when we bought the place that about 300 yards across a gravel road was a buy house, a meth house. And so those people were constantly up and down the roads. And then they started breaking into the ranch house up there, and they'd kick the door in and steal whatever wasn't nailed down for their habits. And we dealt with that for quite some time. And then one day I thought, well, what would happen if I was, this guy? How would I deal with a meth house across the street? And so that's where the first idea for Hard Country came about, and based on Rick Easterwood, who was the undercover agent, his brother Dan, and his brother Dan is a hoot. He all that character. I don't know if you guys have this happen. Do you have a minor character that tries to take over your novel?
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's what happened here too. A Harley Snow was supposed to be just kind of a backup for Tucker, but I got to know Dan very well, and I based him so much on Harley on him that before long Dan's personality began to take over the novel, and I had to reel him in a couple of times, So, and his daughters came at the book signing. They said, "Rev, you nailed him so good. Even his mannerisms, his dad. So you got that down just right." So, I've got that dynamic duo now. A couple of country boys who are just trying to do what's right and to deal with the world of meth and a criminal world going on around them in rural Northeast Texas.
And that's one of the ugliest worlds, frankly, the meth world. I mean, that's bad. Yeah.
It's terrible. And, it kills people left and right. And I've never understood why anybody would try, to suck in chemicals from under the kitchen sink into their lungs to begin with, or inject it or whatever. But then that led me to another idea for the second novel, which is The Broken Truth, which is coming out this August. And in The Broken Truth, we're looking at more current issues too. I don't know if you guys have ever realized, or most people don't, that when they use drill rods out in West Texas to drill for oil, those rods become radioactive. And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they vary in radioactivity. It's not much, but it can be picked up with a Geiger counter. And so then when I found out that was going on, that happens, and people use those rods to make fences and to weld with, and then you can actually get that radiation into your lungs from the dust or the fumes or whatever. Then I thought, well, what would happen if somebody got into something that was really radioactive, like maybe someone stored some radioactive materials in an old dead well out in West Texas, and somebody drilled into it, which is a possibility because my dad was a wildcatter out there in the late 40s. And he said they drilled wells, and when they didn't produce, they'd cap them and go, or they would produce and they would cap them and mark them and wouldn't use that oil for a while. And so if somebody put something down in there that they weren't supposed to, then there's a whole nother world of radiation that somebody might have to deal with. And that's what The Broken Truth is about.
Cool.
The petroleum industry and drilling and drill rods.
That's interesting.
Well, there's a lot. I discovered a lot too. We we're talking about getting away from oil dependency, but look around your house. Everything we own comes from oil. And so, we can create all the electric cars we want, but still we're using oil in all different ways. And so the two of those meshed together and became The Broken Truth, which comes out I think the 23rd of August.
And I'm thinking that with one of those holes, if somebody did put something else down there that's radioactive, you wouldn't know it until people start getting sick, right?
Exactly.
And therein lies the plot right there. When a man builds a fence and winds up getting cancer from building the fence, and they can't chase it down. Look, I'm sorry, Doug, I got into your world a little bit there, but
no.
But
it's true.
Use of it.
Yeah, you don't know about radiation until you know about radiation, because it doesn't taste, doesn't smell, you can't see it. It's just there. a lot of little neutrons attacking your body. That's
Oh
all.
my
That's
gosh.
all.
That's scary business. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And people in the country, they're always using, you can buy the drill rods and you can use them. People are giving them to each other. And I've seen people build corrals out of them, fences, pipe fences out in front of their places in the country.
Yeah.
So it's not, and not all of it's radioactive, but some of it is. And that was the crux of the novel itself.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Very interesting. Well, Reavis, it has been wonderful to have you. You are a great interview. We've got to have you back on when your next book's coming out. Yeah, it's such a pleasure. Really
Well,
enjoyed having you. Thank you so much. You're a great interview.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm full of hot air is what it is. And,
Well, it works.
Yeah,
well, it
Good.
worked.
but that's what us writers are. We're full of hot air. You got to let it out, you know.
I'll
And
let it out somewhere.
it-
But you guys
well,
call me anytime. I'd love to visit with you again. I guess I'll see you guys in Nashville.
yes, definitely.
Possibly. My daughter is
Definitely.
having a baby that's due around that time. So it just kind of depends on how that all
Well,
happens.
babies are wonderful.
Nan and
Yeah.
I will be there for sure, and we will hang out. It's been too long.
It has been. It was before COVID since I saw you.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah,
been
so
way
crazy.
too long.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate it, and what a great chat with Reavis Wortham, one of my favorite writers, and a Texan.
Absolutely.
We love Texans. So until next time, this has been Get to Know on the Outliers YouTube channel, and we will be back with more interviews and more fun soon. See you then.